Chairman Whitehouse, Ranking Member Sessions, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing. My name is Kerrie Burns, and I'm from Coventry, Rhode Island. I'm here to tell the story of my family's medical debt. My story starts in 2004 with the birth of my son, Finegan. A day after Finegan's birth, he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, something that shocked and devastated me and my husband, Patrick. Finegan was a fighter from the start. After some initial difficulties, he thrived in all areas. He was a bright, funny, caring, and loving little boy who was the light of our lives. Finegan was hospitalized in intensive care for 13 months before he passed away this March at the age of 4.5 years old. In February 2008, Finegan became sick with what we thought was just a common cold. After several days of vomiting and simply not feeling well, Finn's doctors suggested we bring him to the hospital to see if he was dehydrated. When we brought Finn to the emergency room, the doctors ascertained that he had a major bowel obstruction, which required surgery. The night of the surgery, Finn went into cardiac arrest, and we were told by the surgeon that Finn would likely not survive the necessary emergency surgery. But Finegan did survive that surgery. He had 6 surgeries in his first 9 days in the hospital and survived countless others. He was intubated for almost 2 months and then received a tracheotomy. Finn was in very rough shape, but slowly and amazingly, his condition began to improve. He showed a fierce spirit and will to live. Finegan spent a total of 8 months at Hasbro Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island. We were then sent to Yale University for transplant evaluation. It was determined that Finegan would require a multi-organ transplant, and we were transferred to Georgetown University Hospital here in Washington. My husband and I stayed right by our son's side during every step of his fight. To do this, we both had to take leave from our jobs. We could not, however, have anticipated how long Finn's treatment would last or the ultimate ramifications of our decision to be with him. During this period, we had only temporary disability income and unemployment benefits, which were far less than we had earned before. We struggled to pay our monthly bills, including our mortgage. As our money dwindled and the bills began to pile up, we did everything we could to keep our heads above water, including cashing in our retirement funds and selling belongings for extra money. Once we were sent to Georgetown for care, we sold our second car. Family and friends were gracious and generous enough to donate money to help us. Eventually, the bills piled up beyond our ability to pay them. We were forced to default, and despite our circumstances, creditors were unwilling and/or unable to help us. They wanted money, and we simply had none to give. The collection calls were unrelenting, upwards of 30 calls to each of our cell phones every day, all while we were in an intensive care unit willing our son back to health. As Finn's hospitalization stretched from weeks to months, we had to make difficult decisions about which bills to pay. The top priority was retaining ownership of our home, and I am proud to say that we were able to make our mortgage payments through 10 months of Finn's hospitalization. Unfortunately, starting this past January, we were no longer able to make those mortgage payments. The emotional hardship my husband and I endured over the course of our son's hospitalization pales in comparison to what we have felt since his loss. Losing a child is the greatest injury for a parent and something we would not wish on anyone. As if this loss were not enough to handle, and rebuilding our lives without our son was not hard enough, we have been faced with financial ruin. When people hear our story and our financial problems, it is often assumed that we did not have medical insurance to cover Finn's expenses. We did have insurance, and the vast majority of Finn's treatments, totaling nearly $5 million, were covered. We were lucky enough that my husband's former employer covered our insurance for several months. After that, we had to pay extensive COBRA fees to maintain our insurance until being approved for state-sponsored health care. Our return from Rhode Island to Washington was difficult for many reasons. First and foremost, we came home without the most important person in our lives. We had so little money left that I was selling belongings on eBay to get gas money and toll money to return home. Back in Rhode Island, we did not return to live in our house, unsure of when the foreclosure process would actually take it. Instead, we lived with friends. We had difficulty renting an apartment because our credit had been ruined. In order for both my husband and I to return to work, we need 2 cars. We have only one and will be able for some time in the future to obtain a second. I had no prior knowledge about how one would file bankruptcy and certainly never thought I would be in the position to have to do so. I have found that it is a demeaning and demoralizing process, one that my husband and I are in through no fault of our own. We simply made the right choice as parents to be with our son in his greatest time of need. In order to file bankruptcy, we needed a $250 retainer, and a $1,300 filing fee. We actually had to borrow the money in order to officially go bankrupt. As if this were not enough, a credit counseling class is required both before and after the filing, with fees in addition to those of the filing. My husband and I sat down to take this class online and were surprised by the tone of the questions, which seemed quite insulting and which included those about why we were going bankrupt and how we could have avoided the situation in which we currently find ourselves. In addition, the course required us to recalculate and resubmit the financial information already submitted to our lawyer. I believe the Medical Bankruptcy Fairness Act, introduced by Chairman Whitehouse, would help families like mine recover from medically based financial hardship. As I understand it, it would waive some of the procedural hurdles to bankruptcy relief, including the humiliating credit counseling requirement. The bankruptcy system needs to be modified to take into account how people actually come into bankruptcy. I've worked since the age of 14. I have a master's degree and have spent my professional social work career helping others. To be unable to help myself and my husband financially after not being able to save my son is embarrassing and shaming and truly adds insult to injury. It is my hope that by sharing our story, changes can be made to the system to help others in a similar situation in the future. Thank you.